In this guide, you'll learn how to randomly place locations on a 2D tile map using Python and Tkinter. This is the starter code for the project. It creates a full screen Tkinter window as well as imports the random module for later use. And this is what you should see when you run the starter code. The first thing we have to do is add a label to the top of the screen. We're going to add it inside of the roots init. So up here, we'll do self.location underscore label is equal to label. Pass in self or the root as the parent, and then we'll set its default text to location. And then now we'll just display it with self.location underscore label dot pack. And if you run the code, you should see the following here. The next step is to create the 2D tile map. Before we do that, we first have to create a game class and give it a map underscore size attribute. Map underscore size will determine how many tiles will appear on the tile map. So down here, we'll just do class game init self, and then we'll set our map size. You can set this to whatever you want. I'm gonna set it to 20. Okay. Next, we'll create a tile map class, which will inherit from Tkinter's canvas class. We'll also pass in a parent widget and the game object as parameters. So I guess we'll put it above our game class here. We'll do class tile map canvas, and then we'll just create the init here. Pass in a parent and pass in the game. Now we'll call it super init and pass in the parent as well as give it a black border with a thickness of 2. So we'll just do super init. We'll pass in the parent, and then we'll set its border color with highlight background. We'll make that black, and then we'll set the border thickness with highlight thickness, and we'll set that to 2. Now we'll store the parent, game, and the game's map size as attributes. Self.parent is equal to parent, self.game is equal to game, and then self.map underscore size is equal to game.map underscore size. Then we'll add the draw tiles method. So define draw underscore tiles self. And so we're going to start this method off with getting the current canvas width and height. So we have canvas underscore width is equal to self.winfo underscore width, and then canvas underscore height, which is equal to self.winfo underscore height. Then we'll use the width and height along with the map size to calculate the width and height of each tile. So tile underscore width is equal to canvas underscore width divided by map size. And then we'll do the same thing here. Just change this to height and height. Next, we'll iterate through each X and Y position on the map and calculate where the top left corner and the bottom right corner should be on the canvas. So here we'll do for Y in range, self.map size, and then for X in range, self.map size. So we'll start off with the top left corner of the rectangle. So we'll do Tx is equal to X times tile width, and then Ty is equal to Y times tile height. And then we'll do the same for the bottom right corner of the rectangle, which is Tx1 is equal to Tx plus tile underscore width, and then Ty1 is equal to Ty plus tile underscore height. Then we'll use these calculations here to draw the rectangle. So we'll do self.create underscore rectangle, and pass in Tx, Ty, and then Tx1, and then Ty1. And then we'll just set the rectangle border width to 2 also, so it matches the canvases or the tile map's border. Next, we'll add an update underscore map method and delete everything off of the canvas. So here we'll do define update underscore map self. We have to pass in an event, but we'll set that equal to none since it really isn't necessary. And then we'll do self dot delete all to clear the canvas or the tile map. Now we'll update the canvas and call draw underscore tiles. So self.update underscore idle task self.draw underscore tiles. And so we'll add a configure binding inside of the tile map so that every time it's resized, the map will automatically update. So up here, we'll do self.bind configure self.update underscore map. Finally, we'll initialize the tile map inside of the root class here. So here we'll do self.tile underscore map is equal to tile map, and then we'll pass in the root self, and then we'll also pass in the game, which we'll add. I forgot to add that earlier. So we'll do self.tile underscore map dot pack to display it. Fill is equal to both, and expand is equal to 1. And then up here, we'll do self.game is equal to game, and then we'll initialize the game object. Your screen should have a 2D tile map appear when you run the code. Now we have to generate and display locations onto the tile map. There are two types of locations, towns and dungeons. We're going to set how many of each we want the game to try and generate inside of the game class. So inside of game, we'll do self.town underscore num is equal to 10, and then self.dungeon underscore num is equal to 10. Then we're going to create a list of names for each location type. So we'll start with the town name. So self.town underscore names is equal to a list. And inside of here, we'll do Oakville, Stonewatch, and Rivermore. You'll probably want to add more names in this, but I'm just going to stop at 3. And then we'll do the same thing for dungeon. So self.dungeon underscore names. We'll do Black Crypt, Shadow Cave, and Skull Den. Okay. Next, we'll create an empty list to store the locations in when they're generated. So here we'll do self.locations is equal to empty list. Now, in order to generate the locations, we need to select a random tile on the map. Each tile can only have one location, so we'll need a method to check for that. We'll create a method called validate location and have it take an X and Y parameter. So we'll do define validate underscore location self X and then Y. To validate the location, we're going to pass in a tiles X and Y, and then check to see if there is any other location that has the same X and Y. If another location already exists at that tile, we'll return false. Otherwise, we'll return true. So for each location in self.locations, if location.x is equal to x and location.y is equal to y, return false. Otherwise, return true. We also need a location class. It needs parameters for its x and y coordinates, its name, and its symbol, which will determine how it'll appear on the map. So here we'll just do class location define init self x y name symbol, and self.x equal to x, self.y is equal to y, self.name is equal to name, and self.symbol is equal to symbol. Now back inside of the game class here, we can add a generate locations method. So So here we'll do define, generate underscore locations, self. Then we'll take the number of towns we set and randomly generate a name and XY coordinates for it. So we'll do for underscore in range, self.town underscore num. We'll do name is equal to random.choice, self.town underscore names. X is equal to random.randint. 0 is the minimum and the maximum is self.map underscore size -1. That keeps it within the map bounds. Then we'll do the same for the Y. So random.randint 0 self.map underscore size -1. So now we'll call the validate location method while passing in the XY coordinates. If true, we'll initialize the location object and then add it to the game's locations list. So here we'll do if self.validate underscore location XY, then self.locations.append location. We'll just initialize it inside of here, XY name, and then we want the symbol for the towns to be a capitalized T. And now we'll do the same exact thing for the dungeons. So we'll do for underscore in range, self.dungeon underscore num. Name is equal to random.choice, self.dungeon underscore names. X is equal to, we just copy and paste this. Yep, so the X, getting the random X and Y stays the same. And then we still have to validate the location by passing in the X and the Y. Then if there's no location there, then we will initialize the location, pass an XY name. But here we'll change this T to a D since it's a dungeon, and then we'll add it to the game's locations list. Now, in order for the locations to actually generate, we need to call generate underscore locations inside of the game class. So just up here at the bottom, we'll do self.generate underscore locations. Now that the locations are generated, we have to add a draw locations method to the tile map class so that we can display the locations on the map. So up here, we'll just do it underneath draw tiles. Here we'll do define draw underscore locations self. So we have to calculate the tile width and height. So here we'll just do tile underscore width is equal to self.winfo underscore width divided by self.map underscore size, and then tile underscore height is equal to self.winfo underscore height divided by self.map underscore size. The locations are going to be displayed as text symbols on the map. Since the map automatically resizes itself, it's best to calculate the font size each time instead of using a hard-coded value. So here with the font underscore size is equal to int. We'll choose a minimum. So we'll choose either the tile width or the tile height. Oh, it's kind of lagging a bit. Yeah, so we'll choose either the tile width or the tile height, whichever one is smaller. And then we'll multiply that by 0.35. You can play with this number, obviously. Then we'll iterate through each location and calculate the center of the tile it belongs to. So for each location in self.game.locations, the center X is going to be equal to location.x plus 0.5 times tile underscore width. And then the center Y is going to be equal to location.y plus 0.5 times tile underscore height. Next, we'll display the location as text by using these calculations. So here we'll do self.create underscore text. We'll pass in CX and CY. And then we'll set the text equal to the location symbol. And then we'll set the font equal to Arial, or you can put in another font type here. And then we'll pass in the font size, and then we'll make it bold. And so finally, we'll call draw underscore locations inside of update map. So here, we'll do self.draw underscore locations. All right, so if you run the code, you should see the towns are represented with the letter T and the dungeons are represented with the letter D on the map. The last feature we have to add is the ability to mouse over a location and view its name in the location label. First, we'll add an update location label method to the tile map class. This method is going to be used for the motion or mouse over event binding later. So here, we'll do define update location label self and event is equal to none. Tkinter automatically passes in an event object into functions that are used for binding. So if for whatever reason the event object is none, we want to set the location label text to a default string and then exit the function. So if event is none, self.parent.location underscore label.config text is equal to location. And then we'll return. So if it's not none, or if the mouse is over a location, then we'll calculate the tile width and height. So here we do tile underscore width is equal to self.winfo underscore width divided by self.map underscore size, and then tile underscore height is equal to self.winfo underscore height divided by self.map underscore size. Then we'll use the tile width and height along with the mouse cursor's X and Y position to calculate the current map tile coordinates. So we'll do X integer event dot X divided by tile underscore width, and then Y is equal to int event dot Y divided by tile underscore height. Next, we'll get the location by passing the coordinates into the game's getLocation method, which we'll create once we're done with this method. So location is equal to self.game.get underscore location, and then pass in X and then Y. Now, if we have a valid location, we'll update the location label with the location's name. So if location self.parent.location underscore label.config text is equal to format location location.name. Let me fix this. The F is supposed to be outside here. Now we'll add the getLocation method to the game class while passing in X and Y coordinates. So just down here, do define get underscore location self X and then Y. To get the location at those coordinates, we'll iterate through the game's location list. If a location's X and Y match, we'll return it. If not, we'll return none. So for each location in self.locations, if location.x is equal to x and location.y is equal to y, return location. If not, we'll return none. So finally, inside of the tile map class, we need to add a motion binding to the update location label method. So inside of the init up here, we'll do underneath our configure binding, we'll do self.bind motion self.update underscore location underscore label. Now, if you run the code, the location label should update every time you mouse over a location. So we'll do a town that's called Stonewatch. That one's called Oakville. That one's also called Oakville. I only put in 3 town names, so this one's called Skolden, Shadow Cave, Rivermore. Okay, everything seems to be working, and so that's pretty much it for this video, and thank you for watching.